Okay, so, okay, now I can share to the chat. Oh, so welcome to you all visitors. So I'm Dr. O'Connor. This is Intro Bio. I'm sitting in the bio classroom, which it's got the best view in the school, I think, down to the pond, and you can see all our mess. And we're starting to make a real mess in here because we're starting independent projects, so there's stuff everywhere. But so we're studying evolution right now and natural selection and thinking about how that works and how it manifests in populations. And so today we're gonna read a document about guppies in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a couple of islands off of South America. And this really, okay, so Jess, I'm gonna share this link again so that you can see it. It's a population of guppies that it's a really famous study of evolution in the wild. And so the link is there in the chat. So if you would tootle off to the link that I have there, you'll see a file called Evolution and Plasticities in Guppies. And so what I want you to do is I want you to read that first paragraph, and then we're gonna stop and talk about what you know about guppies just from that. So I'm gonna quit yammering and give you guys a chance. I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes to read that. Does everybody have it? Can everybody see the document? Visitors, can all you visitors see the document? Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the guppies. Okay, great. Sounds good. Okay, so just from that first paragraph, so you're reading part 1, first paragraph, discovering guppies. Just from that paragraph, what do we know about guppies? What has that told you about guppies? See that? What do you know about guppies?
Well, one of the things is that they have like internalized fertilization.
Yes. Okay, what else? Can you all read that? Sort of, my scrawly handwriting. Okay, what else? How big are they?
Were they less than 2 centimeters big?
Less than 2 centimeters. Good. What else?
There's a lot of them.
They're called the millionfish. Lots. What else? Lots of them. What else?
Female larger than male.
Yeah. Okay. So female greater than male, and that in size. So everybody knows that's female, that's male. Okay, so females are larger than males in size. What else?
The males are more colored and the females are more
Right.
drab.
Okay, so we've got these colorful males, we've got these drab females. What else do we know? What else do the colorful males do?
Their color is used to attract the females.
Yeah, and they have this elaborate courtship, right? Right, so so you folks that are visiting, we watched this video on the birds of paradise in Papua New Guinea, which is this crazy, fabulous population of birds where the males are these incredibly ornate feathers, colorful, and they do these crazy displays. And it's a really important example of sexual selection. And so here again, we have males that are really colorful and they do kind of elaborate courtship. So maybe there's some sexual selection exerting an influence on this population, right? So just knowing that, you could start thinking maybe sexual selection's going on here. Okay, so, okay. The last paragraph of it, or the last sentence of the paragraph says guppies in these environments grow quickly, mature early, and have many small babies so that they have some fitness before they are eaten by the larger predatory fish. So what do they, when he uses that word fitness, what does fitness in that context mean? Doesn't mean their fish are going to the gym and getting fit. What does fitness mean?
Maybe to have like a positive impact on their population.
Yes, like what? Like what is a positive impact on your population? What do you mean? Like how, what does that mean, Caroline?
Well, like the reproduction, so they have more of the guppies.
Yeah, you're fit if you have lots of babies, right? You've passed on your genes a lot. You've survived, right? You've survived the predators, you've survived the food, whatever. Not only have you survived and you've bred and you've produced livable, like live offspring, right? That in evolutionary terms is fitness. It's not about big muscles. It's about your ability to pass on your genes. And so these guppies, if they grow fast and they have lots of babies young, before they get eaten by the predator, they have more fitness. And so there's this push, hey, grow up and have babies quickly because predator fish is down the road and he's going to chew on you. And so if you want to pass on your genes, you better hurry up. Okay, so everybody good with the guppies that we're dealing with? Any questions about any of that? Okay, so now read the second paragraph, starting with Endler, and it finishes on the second page after some pictures. Okay, so Endler, this dude, this really clever dude, hiked upstream, looked at more guppies. He wasn't even sure there were going to be guppies there, right? There are these big waterfalls. How does a guppy climb a waterfall? But regardless, he found guppies upstream, but they were different. So here we're going to have upstream guppies. So how are they different?
Weren't these specific guppies like low predation, and they lived in a low predatory area basically?
Right, there was one predator. He ate the little ones, but he didn't eat the big ones. And this was in definite contrast to the downstream. So now we're going to call this downstream and this upstream. Okay, so this is a low predation environment. How are the fish different?
They're generally more colorful.
More colorful. How else are they different?
They sexually mature at an older age.
Yes, lower to mature. Does that make sense? Why? Yes, I see Victoria nodding. Why does that make sense, Victoria?
So they like in order to survive, they don't need to become sexually mature at a younger age because they don't need to reproduce fast.
So quickly. Yeah, there's not that pressure. There's not the predatory pressure to reproduce quickly. Oh, hi, Elspeth. I didn't see you come in. So the article we're reading is called Guppy Genes. I don't want to stop and put it in the
I
chat.
have it. It's okay.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so they're slower to mature. What else is going on with them? How else are they different?
They're slightly larger.
They're larger. And what else? This has to do with their courtship displays.
Weren't the upstream guppies more likely to do some like, I forgot exactly what it's called, but they were more likely to do some like flashy display kind of thing?
Right, flashier male courtship. Does that make sense? Why does that make sense?
Well, for one is that there isn't like it's not like they're going to be preyed upon while they're doing the courtship rituals, and also it's probably because there's a lot more guppies that the females need to choose from.
Okay, I'm good with point one, maybe point two. I don't know. There are lots of guppies downstream too, but point one, definitely, right? You're out there flashing your spots for the ladies to see. The predators also see you, right? That's a risky business. And so there's a cost to that when there are a bunch of predator fish hanging around. There's less cost to it and potentially more benefit. You're out there flashing your spots and showing the ladies all your spots. You might have a greater chance of getting a mate than a guy who doesn't flash his spots. And there's no downside, right? So what's the cost benefit of flashing your spots? Big benefit, not much cost. Oh, we're going to be really flashy. Okay, so everybody good with kind of the low predation guppies versus the high predation guppies? Like this is making sense? Few nods. Okay. So let me have you go ahead and read the next paragraph, next two paragraphs, and we're going to look at the data. And I just want to make sure you understand the data, and then I'm going to split you into small groups. Okay, so let's talk about his experiment. What was his experiment? What did he do?
He put guppies from a high predation stream into a low predation stream and to see, and then came back 2 years later to see if anything had changed.
Right. He took these guys, these people who had these traits, and stuck them in the environment like that and waited 2 years. So we'll talk about the ethics of that in a second. But so what he's wondering about is, do they change? Do their features change? Because well, actually, I'm going to put you in small groups and have you work on answering. There are 5 questions that talk about, like, sort of sum this up. They're the graphs. And so you can see in the graphs, there are 3 different characteristics that he looked at: spot length, spot area, and spot number. And you can see high predation, low predation, and then the fish that he messed with. And so you can see where they started and then where they ended up, the experimental fish. And so let me create small groups and have you guys, I'll tootle around, flag me if you have any questions, but I'll give you a few minutes just as a group work on answering those questions. So let's do that. And let me, hold on, I just want to mess around here with these a little bit. Okay, there we go. All right, there are your rooms. I'll give you a few minutes to talk about all that. Did you guys get through all the questions? Okay, good. All right. The other groups were struggling. I think they were still on 4, but we will get everybody back here in a second. All right. So what first, if you're ever struggling, if I ever put something like this, when I put something like this in front of you, the first thing to do is just look at the data and make sure you understand what the data is saying before you try to extrapolate and come up with a hypothesis and an explanation and blah, blah, blah. Before you do any of that, it's really important to really look carefully at the data and understand what the data looks like and what they're telling you. So what is this? What is the data? Somebody kind of summarize what those graphs show us.
That there was like minimal change within the guppies when they were moved to the different environment.
Okay, so let's remember what he's saying. So he took a guppy from a high predation spot and he moved it to a low predation spot. Remember, he took the downstream ones, moved them to some upstream spot where there were no predators or very few predators. Okay, so looking at that spot length one, the HP is the average spot length in the high predation group. The LP is the average spot length in the low predation group. So what is the introduced guppy population, which came from the high predation, moved to this low predation pool? What does it look like? What's happened to it?
Wait, I think, oh, I think I flipped it. No, that means that the change was actually really large. I don't have another word for it.
Yeah, no, that's good. The change was large. How can we describe the change even more? Like, it was a big change. How did it, how is it in relation to its the previous population and the population in the normally low predation places? Abby, what do you
It
think?
looks to have.
Sorry, somebody was starting. Who was talking? Somebody stopped.
I was saying that it looks that it actually evolved to be more than the low predation area.
Yeah, it went from the high predation to low predation, and it became even greater spot length than the low predation group. What happened to spot area?
It increased a lot.
Same thing. It increased to greater than the low predation population. And same thing with spot number. Okay, so you see that he's taking these fish from this high predation, these drabber, fewer spots, smaller spots, less colorful spots, sticking them in low predation, and they become super colorful and bigger spots and all this stuff. Okay, so what was the hypothesis that he was testing?
I think it was just like, would the high predation guppies adapt to the low predation environment?
Okay, so that's a question that he was in his mind, but what was his hypothesis? What was he saying was going to cause that change?
If the high predation guppies move, if high predation guppies are moved into the low predation area, then they will adapt and become more like the low predation area or guppies because of the overlying factors in that area, just like because they're going to adapt more colors because there's less predation and so just stuff like that.
There. Okay, so they're going to have more colors. They're going to develop the coloration of low predation areas. So what's going to act so that they develop those colors? So Kieran, you mentioned less predation. Yes, but what else has to be acting so that they do develop those colors? What other type of selection? Not just selection based on predation. What other selection pressure?
Sexual selection.
Yes, who's saying that? There's Caroline. Yes. Why is that necessarily sexual selection?
Because they need to breed to pass on their genes and therefore their color.
Yeah. So we take away the predators, we take away the predation pressure, and the sexual selection pressure can increase our selective pressure to have fancy spots, right? Because the girls still like the fancy spots on the boys. And so there's this selective pressure for that, but the predation pressure was acting in the opposite direction, where there were high predators. Okay, so do you think he proved it? Well, actually, let's go through the questions. So number 2, we talked about, for each color trait, is the introduced population more similar to the high predation source or the low predation reference population? So I think we got through that it's more similar to the low predation. Based on the figure, what can you conclude about the rate of evolution of color patterns in guppies? What do you think, based on this study?
That it happened relatively quickly.
Yeah, why do you say that, James?
Well, looking at the graph again, it seems that there was a pretty large jump in every single category. So with that, I can just assume that it happened relatively quickly, especially since it was only over a span of 2 years.
Yes, this was 2 years. That's like lightning fast when we think about evolution. But he demonstrated that a population will change really quickly if the pressures change. Okay, so is it possible that evolution explains the difference in the 3 populations? Why or why not? And for this, I want you to think about what are the 4 tenets of natural selection? Like, what's going on with natural selection that has to be there for a change to be influenced by natural selection and to have a population change? So what are the 4? First, let's go through the 4 things, like what defines natural selection? Remember that from our thing? What are the 4 things? Somebody dig back through your notes. I know.
Would one of them be like difference in survival and reproduction?
And then do we want to make an argument for anything other than?
Yep. Okay. So that's the end piece, right? That's the final thing. That's the final step. How do we get to that? Because that is the important bit. But how do we get there?
So
Variation.
Okay. What do you mean by variation? What do you mean by variation?
I think the surrounding species are just like the environment and stuff, and just like the different kinds.
It's a little more specific than that, not the surrounding species.
Within one?
Yeah, within the species. So what variation do you think we're thinking about with these guppies?
Color, primarily.
Yeah. Okay, so the underlying population has this variation. Remember the bird beaks, like there's some with big beaks and some with small beaks, and they have this mean beak size. You go through a drought and the mean beak size goes up. There are still some birds with small beaks and still some birds with big beaks. So there's still variation, but it's shifted. There's been directional selection. Remember our graphs and our cacti and our number of spines. There's variety in the number of spines. And the pigs and the parasites affected it, but there's a variation. Not every cactus has the same number of spines. Not every guppy has the same amount of coloration. Okay, what's the next one?
Yeah.
Inheritance.
But I died an hour.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
Mortality.
That would mean that they have to get some kind of gene from like from a parent or something, I'd assume. And that passes down to them, but it mutates due to the change in environment.
Okay, hang on, not mutating. Mutating is a different idea.
Not mutating, but it like adapts to the new environment due to, I guess, the change in whatever's going on there.
Right, due to the pressures. But this sort of idea, somebody else want to chime in on what this idea, like the importance of this idea?
Has to be like I guess a trait that can be passed down through genes and not necessarily like an acquired trait in their life.
Yes, it's not like I go to the gym and lift lots of weights and develop huge muscles and have a baby and my baby has huge muscles. That's not how it works, right? My huge muscles from lifting weights are an acquired trait. It's not a genetic trait. My height, that's a genetic trait. I'm going to pass some resemblance to me and my height onto my baby. But my big muscles, that's acquired, and that will not be passed on to my baby. So this is a really important bit of this whole thing, this heritable. It has to be heritable. It can't be an acquired trait to explain natural selection. Okay, so what's number 3? What's the big number 3 that makes this leap to differential survival?
Isn't it that there's more offspring than resources and they can't support it's like a struggle for existence.
Right. There's a struggle. Nature red in tooth and claw, right? If you want to use Shakespeare. Like, there's competition. Not everybody survives. Not everybody has a mate. Not everybody gets to pass on their genes to babies, right? There's variation in the population. Sorry, there's competition in the population. There's something happening. There's a predator searching for guppies with flashy spots. There's some sort of competition with mates. Girls like flashy spots, and so the drab males don't get offspring, don't have offspring. So there's some sort of competition. Not everybody succeeds equally. And so these are the 4 necessary steps for natural selection. So do we meet this? Do we meet the number 1? Yes, I see Caroline nodding. How about number 2? And they referenced this in the article. What did he say in the article that referenced that? Remember, he talks about how guppies have been bred to be even brighter. Like if you go in a store and buy a guppy, they've selected for super bright guppies because people that have fish tanks want pretty orange fish. They don't want drab brown fish or drab, like not even like it's like this kind of mute color that kind of blends into the background. This flashy orange stuff is what people, when they buy a guppy, that's what they want. And so he even talks about how Endler knew from different color patterns in guppies had a genetic basis because breeders had generated a diversity of fancy ornamental guppies that were sold in pet stores around the world. Okay, so that's definitely, we've got our number 2. Do we have our number 3? What's our number 3 that explains this bit? Explains the data we're seeing. What's
Sexual competition.
Yes.
Between males for female mates.
There are ladies in the low predation pond saying, I want the male with the flashiest orange spots. And they're picking him. And they're causing the population to go from drab in the high predation bit to even fancier than the low predation population. And they're selecting, and they are causing differential survival and reproduction really flipping quickly. 2 years. They caused that change in 2 years. Just the ladies choosing the bright spots caused the entire population to shift from this to that. It's a pretty significant selective pressure to cause that kind of shift that quickly. Okay, so everybody on board with kind of what they saw with the guppies and how it worked? A few vague nods. Okay, so let's talk about number 5. And I know one group definitely was having a good discussion about number 5. Was this ethical? Like, is this something Endler should have done?
I mean, as good as an idea as it was, I don't think it's something that he should have pursued, just because it's kind of, I don't know how much it really actually, wait, I don't know, actually, I don't think it's something he should have done, because now he's kind of just like, I don't know, I just feel as if he messed something up. I don't know what it was, maybe some kind of like food population or something, but I feel like he messed something up.
Yeah, he definitely could have messed something up, right? Some food source for another fish or some food source for another, who knows what he didn't know what he was messing up. You can't, an ecosystem is an incredibly complex thing. When you go take an organism and move it to a new ecosystem, you can't, like, it's impossible to know what effect that's going to have.
I think that for the advancement of like science and our knowledge of evolution, I think it was worth it. But
Okay, so you're in the camp of move the fish. It's all good. Don't
I
worry.
don't know, maybe it wasn't ethical, but I think it was like if given the chance, he would have done it again.
Okay. Anybody else have any ideas on this?
Well, this is highly subjective because the human race is a greedy one. It's also a too intelligent one for their good. My opinion, well, we are the strongest race on this earth. We're the most intelligent one, so we can afford to do that. But I think that that goes into something way deeper than we're discussing right now. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, it's a dilemma, right? Like advancing science, understanding evolution. Science is an important sort of end. We're after knowledge, but we still have to consider the natural world and ecosystem and messing up things that we don't even understand completely. So what he actually did is they went on to build enormous tanks that replicated the streams, and they continued to study these guppies for years and years in the replicated streams, that they replicated the temperature and the shade and all of it the best they could, and they continued to study them, but in a controlled environment where they weren't messing up the streams. They weren't messing around and changing the conditions of the streams. Okay, so the homework for the class members is to read part 2 of the guppy thing. It talks about part 2 talks about their food supply. It's just the next page in that document. So if you guys would read that for homework, and we will discuss that next class. And visitors, thank you for coming. Be in touch if I can answer any questions. I'm glad you were able to sit through a class, and good luck with your decisions on high school. I know it's a big one. So everybody take care. And if the visitors want to stay around and ask any questions, I'm happy to hang around. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hi, Dr. O'Connor. I had a question for you.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw, but Dr. Hyde was doing this program that helped people find STEM camps for the summer.
Yes.
And I guess it's been a month, but a month ago I started to look at different ones, and I found one. It's sort of like a STEM workshop, but it's going to be virtual this year, and I need a reference for the application. So I was wondering if I could have your contact information to put in there.
Absolutely. Happy to write a reference for you. So it's just S. O'Connor, OCONNOR at stanford-d.org. And so,
Okay.
yep, just give them that. I'm happy to write it for you
Okay, thank you. And
as well.
it's only your contact information. So I guess I think it's your phone number and your email. So
Yeah, they'll probably send me a link and I'll write it.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. See you.
Bye-bye.